Goals should be questions and not statements. I'm joined today by Kyle Wagner, who's going to help me demonstrate this process of identifying the key question that we need to be answering as professionals to further our own professional development, and especially that of leaders. Kyle is a project-based learning coach and a specialist in this area when it comes to inquiry. Kyle, I'm opening up with kind of a bold statement here that our goals should not be statements, they should be questions, kind of throwing SMART goals out the window. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I've realized that from my own perspectives that I think goals can sometimes be limited to what you know at the time. And if you write a goal statement, then you might be missing so many opportunities of where that goal could be pushed even farther. And a question opens you up for more of an exploration, connecting to the right people, the resources, and then it broadens your thinking. And that question continually changes and expands your thinking so that really that goal can go a lot farther than what you previously expected.
Yeah, completely agree. Just the question that we're going to be, narrowing down to today is just to get your journey for professional development started. It doesn't mean that's the question we end with. Goals are limiting in that sense because they generally are much more difficult to iterate when they're statements. Whereas questions, we can be constantly tuning and honing based on the information we have. So thanks for bringing that to the fore. What I want to do is I want to introduce to you the form that we're going to be using for this process. This is the Focusing Inquiry interview. This is something I use in all my leadership classes. It was introduced to me by Chris Jansen, who is a phenomenal facilitator, someone who I respect a lot, and I like to consider a friend just because he's been so supportive of me. It's really great, this form, because for years I had a coaching process that basically mirrored this form, but yet at the same time, when Chris introduced this form to me, it was just like, oh my God, I just love how it's like a roadmap that takes us from, trying to identify that focus at a big level, working your way through the weeds, if you will, to get it down to a key question. Now, to be fair to Chris, this is just one of two forms he uses to develop leadership inquiries. But at the end of the day, when I'm working with teams, I want them to use this as an opportunity to kind of open their minds to what they want to pursue and try to distill it down into a question so that we can at least start identifying actions we can take to answer those questions. Kyle is going to be demonstrating this process with me today with something that he has mentioned is a very common theme in a lot of the project-based learning coaching that he does, especially around teams. So Kyle, without further ado, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to open it up with the first question, and I'll be taking notes as you type so that we can try to see how we can distill these notes into that key question at the end. So, hey, what is the focus today?
Yeah, so the focus is, and I think it's one that everyone deals with, whether you're, especially in school, whether you're dealing with a grade level team, whether you're dealing with a kind of cross-disciplinary team, which is what like the work I like to do with project-based experiences, whether it's a leadership team, whether it's a board. But a lot of us are working in teams, and most of us have to deal sometimes with difficult team members. So I would say that's the big challenge. And those team members could be difficult because of just certain behaviors they have, or just certain ways it just doesn't mesh with our thinking. And, from my perspective, of being very flexible type of person, being very open, and this is kind of the way I like to work on a team. And when you come against somebody who has a bit more of a fixed mindset, they have a certain way of dealing with things. And this has to do more specifically with when we're planning out learning experiences for students, which is, sometimes what teachers are doing in a cross-disciplinary team. And you have some people who are really not willing to budge in terms of their ideas. They have very strict rules in terms of what they feel comfortable with doing and what they don't feel comfortable with doing. They maybe done something pedagogically one way for a very long time, and they're not going to shift that way of thinking. And then the whole team kind of has to, amalgamate around that person's thinking. So a lot of times is when it comes to planning different learning experiences, when it comes to actual outings, and we might be taking a kid somewhere, and that person just being off kind of to the side and not being really integral and in with the team. And just really that brings down, I think, the whole culture of the team. And especially when you're a team leader, which is, myself being a team leader of a transdisciplinary team, is finding a way to best deal with that so it doesn't bring down the whole team rapport, without damaging that, but also being able to address that, those kind of behaviors with that particular person.
All right. So, I mean, just to kind of capture what I heard and paraphrasing for those that are using this as a learning video, is incredibly important. As you kind of go through the stages, make sure to paraphrase. So we're talking about, Kyle, in this particular instance, we're talking about difficult team members, and they're difficult because of various behaviors or clashes of expectations potentially for how work should get done. Specifically, say this team member has a fixed way of doing things, strict rules that they're very used to, and they are very strong in pushing for that way. So when it comes to any sort of team discussions, they're not going to kind of just sit back and, maybe be an avoider. They might actually be quite aggressive in advocating for the way they do things. And, if they don't get that way, or the team is engaged in activities that they don't believe are necessarily productive or beneficial, they'll just sit out. They won't participate. So the focus is trying to engage this type of team member. So I guess I would say the focus here is, really how to engage team members resistant to new ways of doing. I'm just going to put things for now, or collaboration. Would that be fair to say?
Yeah, it's more to do with the collaboration. I mean, they could be certainly engaged, and they tune out when they're not engaged, and sometimes they're overly engaged. So it's not necessary with the engagement. I think it's more to do with having them set aside their priorities for really the team, because when it comes to moving a team forward, sometimes there are decisions that need to be made in terms of scheduling and how things are going to look in terms of that. In terms of how we're going to work with different groups of students, and sacrificing a little bit of your own personal will for the good of the team.
I'm going to say priorities. I love using an assessment called DISC, which is all about workplace priorities and how to overcome, like how to be able to compromise when people have different priorities within teams. So, all right, here we go. Next question is really, when we think about this, you did kind of address this in terms of the focus, the significance of this, because when team members are obviously resistant to the ideas of others, they're fixed in their own way, it does impede collaboration. And by doing so, it prevents us from being able to explore, new ways of working. It prevents us from it, it erodes trust, and ultimately, it kind of it ends up being a wall to having these types of productive conversations about like what might be. You know what I mean? So that I kind of gathered that from the focus. Is there anything else that you'd want to add here?
No, I think that captures it.
All right. So basically, again, here, even the focus I have there is, but we're talking about the significance is it limits dialogue and innovation. I'm going to put at the heart of it right here.
Yeah, and I would say too, with student learning, at the end of the day, when it comes to, because especially, I know you deal with more than just educators, but in my particular sphere, that's at the end of the day what we're really trying to accomplish. And we're putting the structures in place like teams to really impact students and student learning, so that it doesn't seem like they just go from class to class, they go from subject to subject. And so I think it really is limiting the amount of student learning that can take place, and the culture. So yeah, student learning and culture of our community in general is really sabotaged when there's one team member that doesn't really want to get along.
Yeah. And so now here we start thinking about, what have you done so far? So obviously you have personal anecdote about this that you were sharing
Yeah.
with me. Walk back to that time with that particular colleague that you would want to address this matter with, that you would want to explore that relationship as an opportunity for professional growth, because that's what this is really about. We're going through this process to identify where the professional growth in this opportunity is. So what did you
Yeah.
do in those cases? And what is
Yeah.
typically done with your coachees?
Yeah. So, a couple things that were done. And actually, this, in terms of my coachees, so this is a specific issue I dealt with when, working with a team within a school and designing these learning experiences, and also stepping back and coaching teachers who deal with the same thing. Some of the things we always try is to empower that person actually and give them more of a voice. So in team meetings, letting them facilitate meetings, giving them that kind of position that I was thinking they wanted more of a voice, and maybe they're just speaking up loud because they don't feel like there's a place for that. So letting them facilitate in rotating meeting roles. Norms, setting norms when it comes to team meetings and our culture, and being very clear about who we are and what we're about. And some norms being, that we put our teams, our team's needs first, and working on those norms together as a team to agree upon those in which they have an input for, which we also did as well. Getting also, moving, because you don't want to move to the place where you're talking to your superior about dealing with this person, the person who's in charge of hiring and firing. But, I've even got to that point where another way of addressing it was saying, hey, I'm really struggling with this team member. We put these norms in place. We've given them rotating roles. And it's not just me, it's other people on the team see that too. And it's really a roadblock. So also going to my higher up to ask for support was another one of the solutions. And then letting them, one of their issues was that students needed to learn all these different skills, and we couldn't just throw a bunch of students together and assume they'd have it. So we let them actually lead a couple sessions in showing us how to do that. So there were a lot of things that we tried. And in terms of working, we felt like we started to get some traction with when they were leading some of those small teams and modeling what collaboration looks like, even though they weren't a great collaborator. And also modeling, when it comes to coming up with ideas with students as well. When it comes to dealing with conflict. So it's like they were modeling it with students, and it was the same behaviors we were seeing from them. And they were able to actually show what it's supposed to look like in a roundabout way. It was like, okay, hopefully this is helping you identify your behaviors.
Yeah.
But they just seem very much like not in tune with how other people are perceiving them, I think, at the end of the day.
Yeah. All right. Well, hey, there's a good list of things there. When we reflect on this, the ideal outcome, what specific results do you want in terms of this focus? Obviously we can say, okay, we want them to collaborate, but whenever I do this exercise as a coach and whenever I demonstrate it with my classes, that's not enough. You need to actually tell me what collaboration looks like then. What are the specific behaviors we're looking for so that we have some sort of way to measure and evaluate our progress towards answering the eventual question. So when you start thinking about this ideal outcome, what does it look like to be collaborating with this person?
Hmm. Yeah, well, collaboration is part of it, certainly, but I think the ideal outcome is a cohesive team at the end of the day, and collaboration definitely works into that. But there's more roadblocks than just collaboration for this person. And I think if we're only perceiving it as that person having a problem, then we're not seeing the bigger picture. So the ideal outcome, I think, is a very strong, cohesive team that plans together, that is understanding, I guess, of each person's working style, and knowing that, hey, different team members are going to have different ways that they need things. This particular person needed to have a lot of clarity around everything before we jumped into anything. So whereas a lot of the team was quite flexible, this person was quite rigid. I think the ideal outcome, what we did see is that there's a better person for the team at the end of the day, the next year,
Yep.
in terms of hiring. However, the ideal outcome at the time is, if you do have that person you have to deal with and they're not going anytime soon, the ideal outcome is really that them feeling, I think, that they have a contribution, and that the team is moving forward in a shared direction and they can be on board for that despite potentially, some of their inclinations.
All right. So, hey, just to continue to probe here, we're talking about a cohesive team. So this is not just collaboration. One thing that was very telling in what you said, though, that I think needs to be further explored and will probably actually be distilled into your question, is this idea that it's a shared responsibility of the team. Just because this team member doesn't want to collaborate doesn't mean that we should focus just on them as the problem. We as a team, if we're unable to get them to participate, and again, the focus shouldn't be on them. So I'm a little, worried about even suggesting that. It's the team's responsibility to get all team members bought into something. So I really liked how you said that, and I think that's very telling right there. An understanding of each team member's working style, I think, is really key. That's something we can actually process and understand. Again, I'm just going to throw out DISC, the DISC behavioral assessment, because if you have something like that, then you actually have evidence that, hey, I am aware of other people's behavioral styles. The team member in question needed a lot of clarification. Well, hey, a good evaluative measure in this particular case is that as you move forward, this team member is asking a lot less questions and putting forward a lot more answers. Have a shared direction, purpose, and goals. Those are all things that are measurable and evaluative. So I think we're good there. Okay, now, hey, look, you talked about, and jokingly you said, well, we know if this team member leaves, at least we know what we're hiring for next year. And, kind of like a unspoken joke in international education is like, 2-year contracts, we just have to wait them out. And then we'll get the team that we want. But that is really bad thinking, because you don't know who's going to come into the team. You don't know how teams are going to change. And school leadership are phenomenally bad at playing musical chairs when it comes to department head roles and stuff. So you don't even know if you're going to be a leader. And it would be really sad to not use this as an opportunity for professional growth. To not just think, well, hey, on my next team, I'm going to use everything I'm learning in these classes. No, try to use them now so that you can build the resiliency to understand how to deploy them in any type of team setting. So let's focus now on the fact of the here and now. What can we do now to begin getting our team? I'm going to come back to something that you talked about, our team to have a shared responsibility towards getting everybody to work together, taking the focus off the individual and focusing it on the team, making sure everybody is interacting and working and taking care of each other.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. And I think at the end of the day, if we look at it through this person's perspective, and they are going to be around for a while, I think really the fear that they're expressing and why they're showing these behaviors is really when it comes to clarity, right? And they need a lot of clarity when it comes to how we're scheduling, when it comes to how we're setting up learning experiences, when it comes to what our hoped outcomes are for whatever unit or project-based experience that we're going through. And once we saw that, and then, we kind of built a project. And I would say, this is an option I would be able to consider more, is we really built a project around one of their ideas. So whereas we thought potentially, hey, this might be limiting, and it was a whole it was based around Chinese New Year. And this staff member said, hey, we should really do digital stories. I've done these with my kids in the past. They like it. And so we just built digital stories around different events during Chinese New Year and various superstitions to help people better understand the culture. And it proved out to be decently successful. I think she was empowered through this. She felt like, okay, we led that. It had just as much uncertainty as any other learning experience, but then rather than pushing back every time she had a gripe, what we did is just, okay, well, how might we structure this experience to make you feel more comfortable or make you feel more confident. You know, what's really scaring you about this? And I think that comes from more an empathetic point of view than a quick, like, how can we quickly just push through this and you know, get rid of this person or get rid of their ideas or ignore them as quickly as possible.
Perfect. And so what I'm capturing here is, you know, we need to focus on clarity of tasks and purpose. You know, in some cases, people could gripe and saying, man, how much more clear can I be? All right. But you know, there are opportunities to make sure the work that we do, that we do spend more time planning, and not just in terms of, you know, setting that big objective, but going into the details, breaking it down. Build projects based on their idea. Ensure all team members have an opportunity to lead that project, because I added that note because, again, we want to make the focus on the team, not the person. But in this particular case, this gives that person an opportunity to lead. How might we question to demonstrate, and how might we questions to demonstrate empathy and frame problems as opportunities? I think that's pretty key and telling to build that sort of mindset within your team, an inquiry mindset. You know, so develop this inquiry mindset. And the important thing here about developing an inquiry mindset is about empathy. Inquiry mindset to promote empathy. Yeah, I like that. And so I think this is, you know, it's more, again, in this process, I think it's really important to try to grind, to be as specific as we can as we go through these boxes, because now we're coming to the key question. And based on everything that we've learned, and what I would hope that my students do with the people they're doing the interview, is basically now kind of go through it. Hey, we started talking about this difficult team member. They're difficult because they're set in their ways, and you know, they might be opposed to any sort of change, and they're going to advocate strongly for it. But through this process, you know, we also identified that this person's possibly doing that because maybe they're not feeling heard. Maybe they feel threatened in terms of their ideas not being accepted. They want to have some validation. The significance of this is at the team level, because it's limiting the team's ability to have dialogue and to innovate. And we know that teams that aren't able to really have professional conversations, do this type of work, it does limit student learning, because it prevents the spawning of new ideas and being able to bring that into different classrooms. What have you done so far? Well, you took a number of steps in terms of empowering the person to lead meetings, making sure that norms were bought into and done collaboratively, not just kind of contrived and put upon somebody. I'm not a big fan of a school saying, hey, these are your 7 norms, now go collaborate. Not to take a pot shot at the adaptive schools, but again, I don't think that's appropriate at the outset. Encourage them to model what collaboration should look like. Ideal outcome, I love how you brought it back to the fact that, hey, this problem isn't about that team member. If we as a team cannot get all team members bought in, that's our responsibility, not theirs. So that was really positive framing there on your side. Options and alternatives, clarity of tasks and purpose, build projects on their idea. So how do we distribute and share that responsibility? Really developing the inquiry muscle of the team, so that questioning and inquiry is actually more of a demonstration of empathy to understand, seek to understand, so that you as a team can have, be not just more aware of each other's preferences and work styles, but also get a better grasp of the experience that underlies it, and how to use that maybe to inform our own practices. So, you know, here I've paraphrased all of that. What's the question that you want to answer at this stage? And be mindful that for setting a key question, it's not something that you can just answer tomorrow. We don't want to make it overly practical, but we also don't want to make it overly aspirational that it just kind of leaves you wondering where to start. We're going to have to find that right balance. So we're not looking to make a task here. We're looking to frame a question that guides us in an exploration. And just know that this question isn't just going to be the only question that we're framing. This is the starting point. Over time, it will iterate as we get more information. So where would you like to start?
I would say, how can we build, and I would say a high functioning team, because I'm thinking of some of the components that include, culture, cohesiveness, common understanding, shared goals that kind of can be wrapped up in the idea of this high functioning team. So we have to explore that a little bit more, especially in light of this particular challenge. High functioning team that really, that supports, I would say, that supports and reflects what we expect to see from our students.
Wow, that's awesome. As a first go, man, that's gonna be hard for me to tune. Normally, to be quite honest, especially for those watching this video, I might spend most of my time on this form. It could be 10 to 15 minutes just kind of reflecting on that question and making sure, again, it's not too practical and it's not too aspirational. But how can we build a high functioning team that supports and reflects what we expect to see from our students? What I really love about that is this question probably starts us on the journey of, well, what do we expect from our students? And how do we demonstrate that as a team? So I see some good elements there for that. This high functioning team element. So how can we build a high functioning team? My only concern about that is potentially maybe a little bit too aspirational, because that's the holy grail of collaboration, this high functioning team. Is there some way that we could be a little bit more specific about what high functioning is? Maybe distill it down to one or a few attributes.
Yeah, we might say collaborative, I guess.
But even collaborative, can we potentially even tune that to some degree?
That maybe understand, I guess, has working styles maybe, or
I like this idea of the working styles. How can we better
maybe honors the working styles too? That honors how can we create a team that honors different working styles, or not just honors them, but actually because it's one thing to understand the working styles, another thing to use those that understanding to build something that's better.
Okay, so how can we develop a team that is more understanding and open to different working styles that supports and reflects what we expect to see from our students? I think that's a great start. I think that's the kind of question you can as a leader, you can begin looking to, you can find some really good research in those areas about how you can bring activities to your team, start trying those activities to see if they do broaden people's perspective and awareness around styles. And then furthermore, then use it as an opportunity to go in with your team about conversations of, well, what do we expect from our students? So there's two elements to this question that I'm happy to keep. Potentially we could even limit it to the one and have this like sort of idea of students come in a little bit later, or find a way even to bring it back. But this is for demonstration. Kyle, you did a phenomenal job bringing your experience into this. I just want to thank you so much. Any final comments from you based on what you experienced in this process?
I would just say thanks as well for the opportunity, and I can certainly see using this actually with the people that I coach, and having a process is, of course, always nice to probe a little bit deeper into what your goals are.
Great. From here in Hong Kong, Kyle and I want to say thank you guys. All right, talk to you later. Bye.